Yeah, so I know this is going to look like some, you know, cheesy homemade video production, you know, with jerky camera movements and all that kind of stuff. That, you know, I just want to reassure you from the beginning here that that's really on purpose. We had to make a decision. I was talking about this with my videographer before beginning, and we had to make a decision, you know, are we going to go with the slick Hollywood production values, or, you know, computer generated graphics and that kind of thing. And we thought that, no, you know, today's young, hip audience really relates more to the sort of jerky, documentary style, handheld camera kind of video. And so, I don't know, you can kind of think of this as like the Blair Chocolate Project. So, in that spirit, I'm just going to kind of wing it here, and what I really want to get across to you is the basic ground rules of the idea behind the chocolate project that you're about to launch into. First of all, as far as ground rules and guidelines that you have to work within, there really aren't any that I'm imposing on you. There are some practical ones that you have to work around. For instance, in thinking about the size that you want your project to be, I don't care what size it ends up being. It can be tiny, it can be big, but the practical limitation that you're going to have to be dealing with has to do with storing your chocolate piece between classes. Whatever you make has to be, our whole class is basically going to have one, maybe two, but probably just one rolling rack. And so between classes, everybody's projects have to get stored into this rolling rack, which basically means you're going to have one or two spaces in that rack that all your stuff has to squeeze into. So what that basically means is that your chocolate piece can't get big until the very end. You can make a big piece, but it can't get big until the very end. Because it's got to fit in that rack with everybody else's. The reason we have to do that is you just can't leave anything sitting out in the chocolate room and have any prayer that it's going to last the week without somebody, you know, messing it up, snapping off a piece and eating it. It's happened before, so basically we're going to squeeze everything in the rack, wrap it up in plastic wrap, and that way we haven't had any problems. So the first, where you're going to have essentially 4 full classes to work on your project. And the first 3 of those classes, you'll just be making the elements of your piece. You'll make all the pieces. The actual assembly doesn't take very long. It's a pretty fast process. What you're going to end up spending most of your time on is making the fussy little bits that are going to get put together in the end. So in plotting your strategy, count on spending 3 weeks making all the pieces, all the elements, keeping them separate, and then count on doing all the assembly on that last class. You'll have essentially almost all of that the last class that we meet to put it all together, bring it all together. It can be something small, it can be very small, but obviously if you're going to do something small, I want to be able to look at that and see that you've got, you know, 4 weeks worth of work in there. Please keep in mind through all of this that my goal in this project is not that you end up with some, you know, beautiful chocolate sculpture. If that happens, that's great. You will be happy, I'll be happy that you're happy, you'll get lots of oohs and ahs and pats on the back, and that's cool. But that's not what this is about as far as I'm concerned. What I really want to see happen here is that you confront chocolate, that you have to learn the process of negotiating with chocolate to get what you've got in your mind. Which brings up a second point. There are really 2 ways of going about this whole business, and both are equally valid, and it's really your choice which you choose. But let me sort of lay out the broad outlines of these 2 approaches. One is to launch in your project with some idea of some mental picture of what you're trying to achieve. So you're going to make a chocolate sculpture that looks like this or that looks like that. And you're coming in with a very clear vision. you're going to try to persuade the chocolate to achieve that effect that you have in mind. Most people seem to do this. The vast majority of people take that approach. Keep in mind that if you do that, that there are going to be things that you're hoping chocolate will do that it simply won't do. Because I realize you're launching into this without a lot of experience in what you can and can't achieve with chocolate. So part of that process is learning what those limits are and then coming up with workarounds. When you find that it won't do this, then you find what it will do instead. So very rarely does a chocolate piece turn out being exactly what you envisioned. The other approach is to not start with a particular idea, not start with a particular vision at all. In this approach, basically what you would do is just become an experimenting machine. You will, between classes, maybe even carry a notebook with you, because through the week, what you're going to be doing in the back of your head is coming up with things that you would like to try with chocolate, just experiments. I'd like to see what chocolate will do if I do this. If I take a piece of aluminum foil and I crumple it and then sort of kind of smooth it out, but leave all the wrinkles in, and then spread chocolate on top of that and let it set, and then peel the aluminum foil away. What would that look like? That might be kind of cool. And then as you come up with ideas like that, you'll make notes in your little notebook. You'll come to each class armed with a list of things that you'd like to try. And you may not stick with that list because you may, in the process of doing one thing, realize that maybe there's this other avenue to explore here, and you'll just take off that way. But basically, you're just going to experiment, you're going to play around with chocolate, and all without a particular end in sight. Then when our classes end, say on that final class, you'll find yourself with a few experiments that worked, probably several that didn't and just ended up in the trash can, but you'll end up with a collection of cool things that you've created out of your experiments. And then you can see if you can kind of get those to connect in some way to make a chocolate piece out of it. It'll be totally random, but some people have ended up with some very cool things. There's a very good chance that it won't be a cool thing. And that is totally fine with me, because you will have gotten, through that process of experimentation, you will have gotten out of the project what I want to see you get out of it, and that is you'll have a lot more knowledge about chocolate. You may have been through classes before, and I know a lot of teachers go about this kind of thing with me just saying, okay, today we're going to make a chocolate Santa Claus, and here's our pattern, and just do like I do. We'll walk step by step through the project, and we'll all end up with essentially an identical chocolate Santa Claus. And that's perhaps got its own value, but you really don't learn an awful lot about working with chocolate that way. A lot of chocolate work, a lot of chocolate learning comes from failure, because that's really where you learn what chocolate won't do, which is just as important as learning what it will do. So I prefer you to kind of take you as chocolate babes and throw you in the chocolate pool and let you thrash around. That can be a frustrating experience, but it is a very rich learning experience. And I'm not going to be concerned with necessarily preventing failure for you. If I see you plowing ahead with an idea that I don't think is going to work, I'm going to let you go ahead and do it anyway. I may make some suggestions along the way, but you'll figure out, you'll find your own way. And I don't count off for your failures. I give you credit for having tried it, whether or not it works.